Hello, dear friends. It's now Motzei Shabbat, Saturday night of Parashat Bresheit. Please excuse my voice. I was ill for a few days, just coming out of it. But I'd like to say a few words concerning the beginning of the Torah, Bresheit. And because, as you know, Bresheit, in English, we call it Genesis, which is, of course, a Greek word for the book of creation. And the Ramban, Nachmanides, also refers to it as the book of creation. However, in Hebrew, it just starts off Bresheit, in the beginning, or the beginning. We'll talk about exactly what Bresheit means. When we say creation, what are we referring to? What is the goal of the book? So let's start with possibility number one, that we're talking about the creation of the universe. Well, if that's what we're talking about, is the Torah exactly a science book that has to explain to us how God created the universe? And if so, why not make the whole book about that? Why just the first chapter? What is it, 22 verses? That's all you're going to tell us? As you know, our Mishnaic tradition says in Chagiga that Ma'aseh Bresheit, the work of creation, is one of the secrets of the Torah, something you're not supposed to expound among more than two people. So if it's a secret, then obviously it's written in a codified way, and I'm assuming it's not so easy to understand. You know, Nachmanides, when he talks about the creation, he asks a question of Rashi. Rashi says, why do we need the Torah to start to talk about the creation? And Rashi finally says the reason, meaning Rashi assumes that the Torah is a law book. Why he's talking about the creation of the universe? So Nachmanides of the 13th century always discusses Rashi. He says, I don't understand Rashi's question. Is Rashi referring to all of the book of Bresheit? Is it not useful, all the stories of Bresheit? Does it not make us better human beings by understanding the goals of our patriarchs and matriarchs and those who followed the good people in the book of Bresheit and the evil ones that we want to keep away from? I mean, that whole book, is it not valuable from an ethical point of view? And if so, then what is Rashi saying? Why did God start with the book of Bresheit? And even Rashi's answer, he says, is very strange. It's just to teach us that God created the whole universe, and therefore he can give the land of Israel to whoever he wants. But that he has to write a whole book. So Nachmanides says that Rashi's question is about Parashat Bresheit, the story of creation. Because in the end all, we all know that the story of creation is a secret. And secrets are not things, there are two types of secrets. There's a child's secret. A child's secret is, I'm going to tell you because you're my friend. I'm not going to tell you because you're not my friend. For children, that's called a secret. As soon as they tell you the secret, it's not a secret. But real secrets are such that even if I were to tell you, you wouldn't understand. Because you have to reach the level of the secret to understand it. Either by being taught preparatory things or by achieving it yourself. That's what a secret is. There's a story about the Nazir of David Cohen, the famous student of Rabbi Kook. In his house, all of the holy books, Sifrei Kodesh, were covered by a curtain, except for the Kabbalistic books. So somebody asked him, why is that? He says, well, I cover the holy books with a curtain to protect them. The Kabbalistic books, even if somebody opens them up, they're not going to understand them anyhow, so they're already protected. So a secret is something which is basically inherently secret. And therefore, you might not actually understand it unless you're able to focus into the if you want to call it the radio wave of the person sending out that message. Now, so when we talk about the book of Bresheit, then, what is it, or is it really about creation? Let's start by assuming so for the moment. If we do assume so, the whole first verse is really problematic. I'll bring it first in Hebrew, just to make my point. You can see here the verse of Genesis of Bresheit. Hebrew says, it's only 7 words, you would think it's not such a big deal. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'daretz. Now, it's usually translated, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. However, Rashi points out in the 11th century that if that was what the Bible wanted to teach us, it should say Barishona, which means in the beginning. What is Bereshit? Also, Rashi says we only find the term Bereshit as something which is related to the ongoing. For instance, in Hebrew, we call it smichut. When we say at the beginning of the kingdom of the king of Yehoiakim, we say Bereshit Mamlechet Yehoiakim, the beginning of the kingdom of Yehoiakim, beginning of the reign of Yehoiakim. And then we would use the term Bereshit. But if Bereshit is smichut, meaning the beginning of something, what is at the beginning of? And secondly, if it is the beginning of something, for instance, if it's the beginning of the creation of heavens and earth, and then you're going to tell me the land was tohu vavo, chaos, etc., then it really should say Bereshit Bero. Even the second word is wrong. If you're the beginning of is not Bereshit bara, which means was created, it should be in the beginning of the creation of. So then the first 2 words are wrong. So Rashi, who cannot come to terms with any one of his 2 explanations, he finally brings a midrash. Rashi usually resorts to a midrash when he's stuck, when he feels that the simple meaning just doesn't make sense. And he brings a famous midrash that Bereshit is on the merit of the Reshit, which means on the merit of those first things, the Torah and Israel, etc. But basically, Rashi is stuck. What does this actually mean? So, for instance, I'll show you in a moment now, this is Sepharia, the way they translate it in their English. When God began to create heaven and earth, which means he takes that explanation of Rashi, of Breshit, that it's smichut, that it's continuing, and it's the beginning of, but Rashi actually says it's not, doesn't make sense that according to the first 2 words, both words would have to be changed, not just the first one. But that's the way he takes it. When God began to create heavens and earth, the earth being uniform and void, and talked to them, that's what the earth. Then God said, "Let there be light." Okay. So how is this possible to understand? Just this first word. Let's bring it back to the Ivrit again. By the way, Onkelos, the famous Bible translator, one of the early Bible translations for the 1st century, brings a translation which is Bikadmin, which could be at the beginning, Bikadmin. But Kadmin could also be the first thing. Now, this still is a problem in the etymology of the verse. I'm not saying no. Grammatically, as Rashi pointed out, it's a problem. But it's interesting. If you understand B'kadmin, meaning this was the first thing that God created, and not like Rashi suggests, but he actually doesn't conclude in his suggestion, but these guys brought. And the question is, why is it the way it is? I want to offer a suggestion here. This is my suggestion. Take the word Bresheit. We're going to say Bresheit represents the beginning of time, because that's what in the beginning would be, right? Beginning is beginning of time. And then Why is it Bresheit? I'll get to a moment. So you have, because remember, to have a universe, you have to create time. So in the beginning, because there has to be time, in order to create anything, God created the heavens and the earth. What does that mean to create the heavens? What are you creating? What's there? What's in those heavens that you created? So now there are a lot of commentators that say in the beginning God created the heavens and earth, even Rashi, for instance, that on day one God created everything in potential. And then from day two, everything went from potential into being manifest and actualized. Okay. I think it's actually a very interesting interpretation. I'm a big fan of Rashi in general, especially when he comes to secrets of the Bible. I found him utterly fascinating. So I want to humbly suggest this. This first verse is talking about what would have to come first. So in the beginning, meaning there has to be time. That's called the beginning. God created Shamayim. What is Shamayim? Shamayim is translated the heavens. However, if you look at the word Shamayim, Shin Mem is the Hebrew word Sham, which means there, Sham. You know, in Hebrew, Sham is there, Po is here, or Sham is there, Kan is here. So there. Now, if you write the word there, Shin Mem, you add Yud Mem, it's now in the plural, which means many, many theirs. It's there, meaning very, very far away. So the Hebrew word for Shamayim, in its simple meaning, this is brought down by many others, for instance, the Vilna Gaon and others even before him, in his commentary on the Torah, that it's just the word Sham there in the plural, which means space. The heavens is just space, which goes on seemingly infinitely, but obviously it's not infinite. It just goes on very, very, very far. And then Aretz, which of course is land, would be matter, the only matter which is described in this verse. So you could say here is there's a verse describing three basic elements of the universe, which is time, space, and matter. Now, it appears that time has to be first, even if it comes together with space, because how can you describe anything as a creation if there is no time? That becomes a problem. Now, another thing, this might also solve the problem of why Bresheit is with a Shva, not Rishonah, meaning in the beginning, or Bresheit Bro, the beginning of creating, etc. You see, time is such that there can't be a beginning. If I am created, let's say, at the first moment with time, the very nature of time is such that, as to coin a phrase by the philosopher Henri Bergson, time is a duration of things. The durée, he calls it. So once I'm in time, I feel time as a duration. I don't feel like it ever started. So even if I would be created the moment time was created, I would feel that I'm in the duration of time without realizing that it started a moment before me, because that's the nature of time. So therefore, you can't actually say by Rishonah at the beginning, because in a sense, when time is created, it's not the beginning anymore for those who experience it. And therefore, you have to say Bresheit, at the beginning of. It feels like it's the beginning of, but it's not the real beginning because nobody's going to feel that real beginning. Okay. So, in other words, what I'm saying here is it's also a statement about time. Time is not something which starts off with a beginning point, because time is the awareness of duration. If I'm going to add to that something by Immanuel Kant, who claimed that the way we perceive the universe is through our abilities to perceive the universe, which is a space-time ability, without he raises the question whether space-time is in the human mind or not, but he doesn't solve it. He doesn't say it's not. But the point is, it is part of our faculty of understanding. And therefore, once you experience time, you experience the idea of endless time, because that's the experience of time. And without being outside of this space-time capsule, you would never, or space-time dimension, you would never know that there was a beginning of space-time where we're talking about time. And therefore, you have to talk Bresheit as if in the beginning, in a sense, because it's not exactly a beginning from the point of view of time as soon as you experience it. That's what I want to mention first and foremost about the first verse. And therefore, we could add to that what Unclus, the translator into Aramaic, is saying, B'kadmin, why it has to be at the beginning, because without space, time, and matter, there is nothing else in the end. Now, the next question is, though, without going to the rest of the chapter of Genesis of the Bresheit, Parshat Bresheit, is the Bible, the first book of the Bible, about the creation? No, it's not. And not even the first chapter, not even the first parasha, only the first actual chapter, what we call the Perek Aleph. But the first parasha is not. It's only the first 22 verses. They're talking in a sense which is more metaphorical. It's actually more than, I think it's 32 verses. This looks like 32 verses. 31 verses, then you have Vaychulu. So you have 31 verses here. So what is the book of Genesis about? Because I personally don't feel that the Bible is a science book. I know there are those who try to make parallels between the first chapter of Genesis and modern science, and I respect them for that. There are amazing books by Professor Natan Aviezer and Professor Gerald Schroeder, really works of art making these parallels. However, in some of our early commentators, especially of the Kabbalists, there are those who raise the question of whether Genesis after verse 1 is even talking about the creation. Maybe it's talking even about how God governs the universe in every moment. That's the opinion, for instance, of Rabbi Asher ben David, the grandson of the Ravad of Posker, of Raham ben David of Posker, also a known Kabbalist. So I'm just saying that these are arguments among the Kabbalists, among the Bible commentators, so I don't want to go into that question at the moment. What is the goal of the Genesis, of the beginning? It's the genesis of mankind. And I'll give you a proof. We have a holiday. First, a general proof, and then a very obvious proof. We have a holiday which is called Rosh Hashanah. Call it New Year. But in our tefillah, we say, Zeh hayom tchilat ma'asecha, zikaron liyom rishon. This is the day, the beginning of your works. Sounds like creation. Reminding us of the first day, zikaron liyom rishon. However, the Talmud, specifically in Rosh Hashanah, very clearly says that Rosh Hashanah commemorates the creation of Adam and Eve on the sixth day of the Genesis story. So is it Zikaron Liyom Rishon? Is it about the first day or the sixth day? It's about the first day of mankind. The Bible is a story about mankind. It's not a history book, even though you can learn history from it. It's not a science book. Maybe there's ways to learn science from it, but I guess you'd have to first be a scientist to figure that out. But it's a book about human beings. And it's a book to teach us ethical practice and ways. Because fortunately or unfortunately, this very complicated computer called the human brain or the human body does not come with an instruction pamphlet. And therefore, one time in our history, we were given one. And it's called the Bible. And it tries to teach us the ethical way. And that's why at the end of the book of Bresheit, after God created this universe, it seems to be an amazing thing. You look at all the way at the end of the chapter of the Perikopa, of the whole parasha, you would think that, I don't know, there were not everything done that well, maybe, but in general, it looks like, God did a lot of things and accomplished many things. Okay, Adam and Eve ate from the tree that they weren't supposed to eat from. Cain killed Hevel. It's true. Things were not working out so well. And that, God created a universe that definitely worked without a glitch. What does it say at the end of Bresheit? It says, and this one I'll turn into the English for you. This is right at the end of chapter 6. The end of the Perikopa, the end of the chapter of Bresheit. God saw, they're just using the Hebrew for God, saw how great was human wickedness on the earth, how every plan devised by human mind was nothing but evil all the time. And God regretted having made humankind on the earth with a sorrowful heart. And God said, I will blot out from the earth humankind whom I created. Humans, together with the beasts and the creeping, crawly things and the birds of the sky, for I regret that I made them. I might say, hey, the creepy, crawly things and the birds of the sky, why is it their fault? Because this whole ecosystem is supposed to be run by human beings. And if you don't have the pilot, somebody's got to fly the plane. So if the human beings are being wicked and they're going to destroy everything, I got to start from the beginning. Then there is one touch of favor. And Noah found favor in the eyes of God. There's finally a human being who looks like, it's okay. The Bible even says he's a tzaddik, he's righteous. And God finds Noah acceptable. And Noah is the first light at the end of the tunnel that there maybe will be a good human being who's not interested only in self-interest and evil. And after Noah, as you can see, it didn't help because there had to be a flood anyhow. And God wiped out mankind, but he continued mankind with Noah until finally came Abraham. And Abraham became the type of human being that God was looking for. Somebody who's willing to put themselves out for others, who's willing to go to those horrible towns, Sodom and Gomorrah, who are doing evil ways, and say, God, you have to give them benefit of the doubt and make sure you're not destroying righteous people with evil. Who's he trying to save? He's not even being paid by them. He doesn't get any benefit. They probably don't even like him. But it's a man who believes there has to be justice and righteousness in the world and is willing to put himself on the line for that. That's Abraham. And that's what God's looking for. And that's what the whole book of Bresheit, of Genesis, is about. And to quote Professor Abraham Joshua Heschel, who wrote a book called God in Search of Man, the whole Bible, especially in the book of Bresheit, we tend to talk about human beings looking for God. But in the Bible, God is in search of a righteous man, meaning of people, man, woman, child. And the Bible is all about God looking for a righteous person who's willing to put themselves out for somebody else. And that's a big deal. Shalom, shalom, Shabbat.